Tommy, the Ghost Malone, and Lisa Carter weren't your typical criminals. They were Liverpool's most elusive cocaine lords, building a shadow empire beneath the city's working-class streets. For decades they stayed invisible, pulling the strings of a vast drug network, while living lives no one would suspect. This is the story of how they rose, ruled, and almost disappeared without a trace. Liverpool was a city built on hard work, resilience, and community. Its streets echoed with the cheers of football fans, the clatter of cargo at the docks, and the daily grind of people trying to make a living. Yet beneath this familiar surface, an invisible world was growing, one filled with danger, greed, and silence. For decades, a powerful cocaine empire was quietly taking root, spreading through Liverpool's working-class neighborhoods like a shadow no one could catch. The story begins in the 1970s, a time when Liverpool was struggling economically. Shipyards and factories were closing, and many people faced poverty and uncertainty. It was the perfect environment for criminals to take advantage. As traditional industries died, new ones emerged. Illegal ones, drugs, especially cocaine, started appearing in small amounts, often dismissed as isolated incidents. But behind those small deals was a larger force at work. No one saw the real bosses. They weren't flashy criminals with loud cars or public feuds. Instead, they were silent figures who stayed out of the spotlight. They moved in the shadows, running their operations from the back rooms of pubs, quiet warehouses, and even ordinary homes. Their power came not from violence, but from secrecy. They controlled the supply of cocaine, making sure it flowed smoothly through Liverpool's streets, without attracting too much attention. The docks of Liverpool, once a symbol of the city's strength, became a gateway for drugs coming from faraway lands. Large shipments of cocaine arrived hidden inside containers filled with everyday goods, fruit, electronics, machinery, everything but what was really inside. Customs officials and police had little chance of catching these shipments because the syndicate used clever methods to avoid detection. At the same time, the people involved in the cocaine trade weren't always the stereotypical criminals. Many came from the neighborhoods themselves, locals who understood the city's rhythms and used their connections to stay one step ahead. This made the syndicate nearly impossible to break. The more the police tried to investigate, the more the criminals adapted, staying just out of reach. Liverpool was unknowingly hosting a hidden empire, one built on fear, loyalty, and silence. The city's working-class neighborhoods, once a source of pride and community, had become the backbone of a criminal network that no one fully understood until now. By the 1980s, cocaine was no longer just a rare, dangerous drug whispered about on the edges of Liverpool's streets. It was becoming a widespread problem. What seemed like random drug deals or small-time criminals suddenly revealed themselves to be part of something much larger. The Scouse Syndicate wasn't just selling cocaine in pockets or alleys. They were building an empire, quietly expanding their reach across the city and beyond. At first, their operations were small and careful. The syndicate used the city's famous docks to bring in cocaine shipments, but they did it in a way that drew no attention. Instead of large, flashy shipments, they relied on small, well-hidden loads packed inside everyday goods. Containers labeled as carrying fruit, electronics, or machinery would pass through customs with little suspicion. The smugglers had perfected their craft, understanding the shipping business better than most, and exploiting every weakness in the system. The syndicate's growth was also aided by their use of local gangs and street-level dealers. These groups acted like middlemen, handling distribution in their neighborhoods, while paying a cut to the bosses above them. This allowed the syndicate to stay hidden. The people at the top never dealt drugs directly or got involved in street violence. Instead, they stayed behind the scenes, collecting profits and managing the network. What made the syndicate especially dangerous was their ability to stay silent and invisible. Unlike other drug lords who might use violence and intimidation openly, these criminals built their empire on trust and fear, but mostly on silence. Informants and witnesses rarely came forward because they knew the risks, and the syndicate made sure of that through subtle threats and promises of rewards. Meanwhile, the cocaine coming into Liverpool kept increasing. The drug became more popular among young people and adults alike, fueling demand and pushing prices higher. The syndicate responded by expanding their network into new neighborhoods, reaching further into the city's heart. It was a slow but steady takeover, unnoticed by most, but devastating in its impact. As the syndicate grew stronger, law enforcement found themselves chasing shadows. Every time they thought they had a lead, the criminals seemed to vanish or shift their tactics. The cocaine trade was no longer about street corners. It was a complex hidden business that few outsiders could understand. Liverpool was changing, but most people didn't realize it yet. The syndicate was silently taking control, and their empire was only beginning to rise. The leaders of the Scouse Syndicate were nothing like the drug lords portrayed in movies or newspapers. They didn't crave fame or headlines, and they certainly didn't walk around with flashy jewelry or expensive cars. Instead, these figures were masters of invisibility, blending seamlessly into Liverpool's working-class neighborhoods. Their power came from being unnoticed, a shadowy presence lurking behind everyday life. These hidden bosses rarely appeared in public or social settings. They ran their operations from quiet pubs, unmarked warehouses, or the backrooms of ordinary businesses. Unlike other criminal organizations known for loud violence or public displays of wealth, the syndicate maintained a low profile. Violence was kept to a minimum and only used when absolutely necessary. Their strength came from control, connections, and silence, an invisible grip that kept the city's cocaine flowing. The syndicate's leaders were known to the people closest to them, but even the middlemen often didn't know the full hierarchy. They operated in cells or small groups, each with limited knowledge of the bigger picture. This made the organization nearly impossible to infiltrate or dismantle. If one part was caught or arrested, the others remained untouched, continuing business as usual. Liverpool's neighborhoods unknowingly protected these leaders. They were neighbors, family members, or long-time locals who understood the city's rhythms and who could move without raising suspicion. Some ran legitimate businesses as a front, from small shops to nightclubs, masking their real activities. This allowed them to launder money and maintain the appearance of normal lives. The syndicate also relied on an unspoken code of silence. People didn't talk to outsiders or the police, either out of loyalty, fear, or simple acceptance. Witnesses vanished, and informants were rare. The criminal world in Liverpool was built on trust within tight circles, and betrayal was met with swift consequences, though usually without public violence. This invisibility was the syndicate's greatest weapon. While the rest of the city went about its daily life, these masked lords controlled an empire from the shadows. Their silent reign lasted for decades, hidden in plain sight, making Liverpool one of the most important but least understood centers of cocaine trafficking in the country. The cocaine flooding Liverpool didn't come from nowhere. It was the result of secret and carefully built connections reaching halfway across the world to South America. The Scouse Syndicate didn't produce the drugs themselves. Instead, they formed hidden partnerships with some of the most powerful and dangerous cocaine cartels in Colombia and Peru. These relationships were the backbone of their empire, allowing vast quantities of cocaine to flow smoothly into the city's streets. South America was the source of most of the world's cocaine, produced in remote jungle areas and controlled by violent cartels who ruled with fear and money. These cartels needed reliable partners to move their drugs into Europe, and Liverpool's docks became a crucial link. The syndicate's leaders had connections deep enough to negotiate directly with cartel representatives, arranging shipments that passed through complex international routes designed to confuse law enforcement. The cocaine shipments were hidden in ingenious ways. Containers stacked at the docks appeared ordinary, filled with fruit, machinery, or electronics, but inside were secret compartments hiding kilos of cocaine. These shipments passed through customs thanks to bribes and careful planning. The syndicate had insiders who helped move the containers quickly before officials could inspect them thoroughly, making Liverpool a perfect entry point into the UK. Once the cocaine landed, it was broken down into smaller shipments and distributed throughout the city and beyond. This global partnership was not just about drugs but also about money and trust. The syndicate sent huge sums of cash back to the cartels, laundering it through legitimate businesses and complex financial routes to avoid detection. This international connection made the syndicate much more than a local gang. They were part of a global criminal network, working with some of the world's deadliest organizations. The risks were enormous, but so were the rewards. The cooperation between Liverpool's syndicate and South American cartels was a secret kept behind layers of deception and silence. The ability to maintain these connections without drawing attention was a testament to the syndicate's skill and power. While Liverpool seemed like a distant city on the edge of Europe, it was at the center of a shadowy world where international crime bosses moved vast fortunes and deadly drugs, hidden in plain sight. The Scouse Syndicate was much more than just a drug trafficking operation. Their power scrutiny. Despite the increased ruthlessness, this generation of criminals was smarter and more cautious. They kept their identities hidden and used layers of trusted associates to insulate themselves from direct involvement in illegal activities. This made arrests of key figures almost impossible because authorities rarely had enough evidence to connect the top bosses to the crimes. The Scouse Syndicate, once a quiet and secretive group, had transformed into a sprawling criminal empire powered by technology, money and fear. As law enforcement struggled to keep up, the syndicate's grip on Liverpool's streets only tightened, proving that when crime evolves, so must those who fight it. For years, the Scouse Syndicate had seemed untouchable, their operations hidden behind layers of secrecy and protection. But in the mid-2000s, cracks began to appear in their carefully constructed empire. It started with the arrest of a low-level courier, a young man caught trying to move a small shipment of cocaine through a Liverpool neighborhood. At first, the arrest seemed insignificant, just another minor player caught in the drug trade. But what followed would shake the syndicate to its core. During interrogation, authorities discovered clues that pointed to much bigger operations. The courier's phone contained encrypted messages and contact lists that hinted at a complex network of dealers, suppliers and financiers. Investigators began piecing together this puzzle, uncovering hidden ledgers, secret safe houses, and a web of communication that spanned the city. The information revealed a level of organization and scale that few had imagined. The courier's arrest set off a chain reaction. Police raids on warehouses and nightclubs seized large amounts of cocaine, weapons and cash. With each new discovery, the syndicate's reach became clearer. What had once seemed like scattered street dealers was actually a highly coordinated criminal machine with clear lines of command and control. The syndicate responded with force and cunning. Key members went underground, disappearing before police could capture them. Some fled the country, using their international contacts to escape to South America or mainland Europe. Others tightened security, changing communication methods and shifting operations to new locations. This sudden disruption caused chaos within the syndicate, but it also made law enforcement realize just how deeply rooted the organization was. Despite the pressure, many questions remained unanswered. How many leaders were still at large? How far did the corruption within local institutions run? The arrests revealed only a fraction of the syndicate's true size. For every person taken off the streets, there seemed to be two more ready to fill their place. The cracks in the syndicate's empire marked the beginning of its downfall, but also exposed the challenges ahead. Taking down such a shadowy and adaptable network would require relentless effort, courage, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths about Liverpool's hidden criminal underworld. After years of careful investigation and countless dead ends, law enforcement finally launched a coordinated operation that struck at the heart of the Scouse Syndicate. This massive crackdown involved simultaneous raids across Liverpool's neighborhoods, targeting warehouses, clubs and homes tied to the cocaine empire. It was a bold move, aiming to disrupt the syndicate's control and send a clear message that the city's hidden drug lords were not untouchable. Police seized vast quantities of cocaine, enough to supply thousands, and uncovered sophisticated drug labs, hidden compartments in shipping containers, and stacks of cash. The raids resulted in the arrest of several key figures, men who had managed to evade capture for decades by remaining invisible. These arrests were celebrated as a major victory, but they only revealed part of the story. Despite the success, some leaders vanished without a trace. They slipped away before the police could close in, disappearing into underground networks or fleeing abroad. These elusive figures remained ghosts, their identities and whereabouts unknown even to the most determined investigators. Their ability to vanish deepened the mystery surrounding the syndicate and raised uncomfortable questions about how deeply the network's influence ran. The operation also exposed just how embedded the syndicate was in Liverpool's communities. Many of the arrested individuals were locals, neighbors, family members, and once trusted friends. The cocaine empire was not made up of outsiders, but ordinary people who had built double lives. This realization hit the city hard, shattering illusions and forcing a reckoning with the hidden dangers lurking beneath familiar streets. While the crackdown slowed the flow of cocaine for a time, it did not end the trade. The syndicate's structure allowed it to adapt quickly. New leaders stepped forward to fill the gaps, and operations shifted to avoid future raids. The police knew this was only the beginning of a long battle to dismantle the criminal network entirely. The fall of the visible syndicate leaders marked a turning point, but it was clear the empire's roots ran deep. Liverpool's cocaine lords were no longer invincible, but the fight to uncover the full extent of their power and bring every one of them to justice was far from over. Even after the high-profile arrests and raids, the shadow of the Scouse Syndicate lingered heavily over Liverpool. The cocaine empire may have been dealt a serious blow, but its impact on the city was far from erased. The syndicate had left behind a legacy of destruction that continued to affect communities long after its leaders were taken into custody. With the old power structure weakened, new gangs quickly moved in to claim territory. These groups were often less organized and more violent, sparking turf wars that put innocent residents in danger. The vacuum left by the syndicate's downfall created instability, making neighborhoods more unpredictable and unsafe. Residents who had already suffered from years of drug addiction, crime, and poverty now faced an uncertain future. Cocaine use itself remained widespread. The demand had not disappeared with the arrests. Instead, drugs became easier to access, as smaller dealers tried to capitalize on the opportunity. This kept addiction rates high, and stretched police resources even thinner. Efforts to prevent drug abuse and support recovery faced uphill battles against this persistent threat. Law enforcement struggled to rebuild trust in communities shaken by years of corruption and fear. Many residents were hesitant to cooperate, either because of past betrayals or fear of retaliation. The syndicate's influence had created a deep mistrust between the public and the police, making it difficult to gather information and maintain long-term safety. Overcoming this distrust became one of the greatest challenges for authorities trying to heal the city. The damage was also social and economic. Businesses that had once been fronts for money laundering either closed or changed hands, but the stigma remained. Entire neighborhoods struggled with unemployment and lack of investment, partly due to the syndicate's long-standing control. The scars of the cocaine empire were visible not just in crime statistics, but in the daily lives of Liverpool's people. The legacy of the syndicate was a painful reminder that criminal empires don't just vanish with arrests. Their effects ripple through generations, and the work to rebuild and recover can take decades. Liverpool faced a difficult path forward, determined to overcome the shadows but haunted by the past. The most shocking truth about the Scouse Syndicate was that many of its leaders were never caught. Not because they escaped to faraway places or hid in secret hideouts, but because they lived ordinary, unassuming lives in plain sight. These hidden cocaine lords blended so seamlessly into Liverpool's neighborhoods that neighbors, friends, and even family members had no idea who they really were. Their ability to live double lives was perhaps the syndicate's greatest secret and strongest defense. Behind closed doors, these individuals controlled vast amounts of cocaine and money, making decisions that shaped the city's underground economy. Outside, they were respected members of their communities, running small businesses, attending local events and raising families. This careful balancing act allowed them to avoid suspicion and continue their operations for decades without attracting attention. Their invisibility was made possible by layers of trusted associates and frontmen who handled day-to-day dealings. This structure insulated the top bosses, keeping their identities hidden even from many within the syndicate. Law enforcement often focused on visible figures, street dealers, mid-level managers, but the true masterminds remained shadowy and untouchable. This hidden nature also meant that the impact of their crimes was felt differently. Communities were caught in a strange grip where danger and normal life coexisted. People lived near powerful criminals without realizing it, and trust within neighborhoods became fragile. The syndicate's reach extended beyond drugs, influencing social dynamics, business dealings, and even local culture. The story of the Scouse Syndicate is a stark reminder that criminal empires don't always look like what we expect. Sometimes, the most dangerous criminals are those who hide behind masks of normalcy, thriving where no one thinks to look. Their power comes from being invisible, blending into everyday life while pulling the strings of a shadowy empire. As Liverpool continues to rebuild and move forward, the legacy of the syndicate remains a warning. Behind the city's vibrant streets and tight-knit communities lies a history of silence, deception, and hidden crimes. The challenge now is to ensure that no criminal empire can grow so deeply hidden again.